The day my son got married, they made me sit behind a pillar, invisible to everyone but the crowd. Baby, I could feel every whisper. Every look meant to erase me, cutting deeper than I ever imagined. And just when I thought I'd be alone in my heartbreak, a stranger took my hand, and everything changed. Baby, let me tell you, I never imagined my son's wedding would feel like a battlefield. I was supposed to be at the heart of it, standing proud beside him, my joy spilling like sunlight over everyone in that room. But instead, they made me sit behind a pillar, alone, hidden, invisible. I could hear the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the soft strings of the violin echoing through the hall, but it felt like it belonged to another world, one I wasn't allowed to touch. My hands trembled against the cold, polished wood of that pillar, my heart thundering so loud I thought it might give me away. And oh, the pain, baby. The betrayal stung like a sudden slap I never saw coming, from my own family, from the people I had spent a lifetime loving. And then, I felt it. A warm, steady hand taking mine. A stranger, someone whose eyes didn't judge, didn't pity, but simply held me. In that instant, my world shifted. That day, baby, I learned a lesson I would never forget. Sometimes, the hand that saves you comes from the most unexpected place. Baby, let me take you back to that morning, the morning of my son David's wedding. The sun was shy, peeking through the tall windows of our old family home, spilling golden ribbons across the polished wooden floors. I was in the kitchen and oh, the smells, the rich aroma of coffee brewing, the sweet scent of vanilla from the bakery's cake waiting downstairs, and the faint, earthy fragrance of the roses in my garden wafting through the open windows. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath for this day, and so was I. David was in his room, fumbling nervously with his tie. I could hear him muttering under his breath, adjusting the knot again and again, as though perfection could be found in that tiny loop of fabric. I stepped in, smoothed his hair, and whispered, "Baby, you look like a young man I raised, ready for the world." He laughed softly, his nerves easing for just a moment, and I held his shoulders and kissed the top of his head. The house was alive with movement, yet peaceful in its own way. My son's childhood friends, now grown men, were helping each other with cufflinks. My daughter-in-law's younger cousins were skipping across the hall, their giggles echoing against the walls. I caught my husband in the kitchen, smiling over his coffee cup, the soft morning light highlighting the silver in his hair. Everything felt perfect. I thought, this is how life should feel. Warmth, laughter, and love all wrapped together. Even the ticking of the old wall clock had a rhythm that felt steady and promising. I remembered the first time I held David in my arms, a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket, his soft cries filling the quiet of the hospital room. I had rocked him, whispered promises of protection, of guiding him through the storms of life. And now here he was, a grown man, stepping into a new chapter with a woman I barely knew. My heart swelled with pride. But somewhere beneath that pride there was a flutter of unease, a tiny whisper I ignored. We got into the car to head to the venue. The streets were alive with morning light, children on their way to school, neighbors greeting each other with waves. I held David's hand in mine, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. "Mom," he said softly, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. "Don't worry. Everything will be perfect." I smiled, trusting him, trusting love, and for a moment, I truly believed it. When we arrived at the wedding hall, my breath caught. The chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, draping the room in a warm, ethereal glow. The tables were dressed in white satin, floral arrangements standing tall like delicate sentinels. Guests began arriving, laughter and music filling the air. Everything was beautiful, cinematic even. I moved through the crowd, greeting family and friends, my heart full. I shared stories, laughed at little childhood memories, and watched David interact with his guests. The world seemed to pause around him, as if recognizing that this was his moment, his time to shine. And oh, how proud I was. But even in that golden morning glow, baby, there was a subtle tension I couldn't shake. Small things, a glance exchanged here, a quiet whisper there, fleeting, almost invisible, but enough to make the air feel heavy at times. I thought it was just nerves, just the chaos of weddings, and I let it slide. I didn't want to see what was coming. As the music swelled and the moment approached for David and his bride to walk down the aisle, I felt a strange mix of excitement and unease. My son was glowing, radiant in his suit, and the bride, beautiful, poised, looked every bit the part of the woman who would soon be family. I tried to picture the future, us all together, laughing at holidays, sharing meals, making memories, yet a tiny, uneasy voice whispered at the edge of my heart. Watch carefully, Auntie Grace. Sometimes appearances hide the truth, and in that moment, baby, I had no idea how right that whisper would turn out to be. The calm, the nostalgia, the golden warmth, everything I loved about this morning would soon be replaced by a storm I didn't see coming. But for now, in this quiet, cinematic pause, I simply held my son's hand, breathed in the scent of roses and vanilla, and prayed that love would guide us through the day. Baby, the wedding hall was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen droplets of sunlight, the soft white satin on the tables glimmering under the golden glow. The flowers were arranged so meticulously they seemed almost unreal. Delicate petals in perfect harmony, like the day itself had been painted by someone who loved beauty more than anything. Guests arrived, greeting each other with warmth, laughter echoing through the marble floors, and for a brief moment I thought, this is how life should feel. Everything perfect, everything bright. But then, subtle things began to prick at me, small, quiet signals that something wasn't quite right. My sister, who had always been warm and comforting, gave me a glance that didn't reach her eyes. Polite but sharp, almost like a warning, my daughter-in-law's mother lingered a little too close to the center of the room, arranging herself as though she were protecting some invisible boundary. Baby, even the way the bridesmaids positioned themselves seemed deliberate, almost choreographed, to leave me out. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just nerves, just the chaos of weddings. After all, these were happy moments, but every whisper, every quick glance, felt like a pinprick, and my chest tightened with an unease I couldn't shake. When David and his bride appeared at the altar, radiant and smiling, my heart leapt. I wanted to rush forward, to stand beside him, to share his joy in the open, as a mother is meant to do. But someone's hand on my elbow, soft but firm, redirected me. "Mom, right here," someone whispered. And just like that, I was nudged behind a tall, cold pillar. Hidden. Baby, I felt my heart sink into my stomach. I could still see everything. The bride's delicate veil catching the light. The way David's smile made his whole face glow, but it was as if I were watching from a distance, through a pane of invisible glass. Laughter and music floated past me, but it no longer reached my ears in full. It was muffled, a dream slipping through my fingers. I noticed whispers now, quick little exchanges I wasn't meant to hear. "She'll make a scene if she's too close. Better keep her over there." And suddenly, I realized that this wasn't accidental, baby. It was deliberate. They had decided my place, behind the pillar, invisible. I sank a little, gripping the cold wood for support. My hands trembled. My mind raced. I thought of all the mornings I had spent preparing this son of mine for the world. All the nights I had whispered prayers over him. All the sacrifices I had made. And now they treated me as though I were a stranger. Not just a stranger, a problem to be tucked out of sight. Even David didn't seem to notice. He was busy, smiling at the guests, nodding at family, basking in his moment. He was happy, yes, but oblivious to the quiet betrayal unfolding right behind him. Baby. It was almost worse that he didn't see it. A server brushed past, carrying a tray of champagne, and I noticed the cool metal of the tray's edge nick my fingers as I held on to the pillar. The sound of glasses clinking somewhere in the distance felt deafening. Every laugh from the front of the room seemed to amplify the silence pressing down on me. I tried to remind myself to breathe, to stay calm, but my chest ached, heavy with disbelief. I watched as my son and his bride moved gracefully, exchanging vows, smiles bright and unbroken. And I realized no one had planned for me to witness this properly. I wasn't meant to share in their joy. My presence was tolerated, but only at a distance, like some background prop in a movie I had once been the star of. Even the photographer, busy capturing the perfect angles, seemed to avoid me. Every time he glanced in my direction, his expression was polite but clinical. I was part of the scenery, not part of the story. Baby, I felt a sting deeper than anything I had ever known, a quiet, gnawing ache that spread through my bones. And then came the whispers that truly cut. She's too dramatic. She'll overshadow the bride. Baby, I could hear the words, sharp as knives, slicing through the warm air of celebration. The people I had loved, the people I had trusted, were quietly conspiring to make me invisible. I pressed my forehead against the pillar, taking slow breaths, trying to keep my composure. But even as I tried to steady myself, a part of me began to notice something else, a pattern. The way glances were exchanged, the way hands moved, the way smiles hid tension. I realized then that this was more than subtle discomfort. This was a careful, deliberate arrangement. My exclusion was orchestrated. I felt tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Baby, I had to see how far this went, how much they had planned, before I allowed my heart to shatter completely. The music swelled, and the crowd clapped, unaware of the quiet drama behind the pillar. And that's when I caught it. A glance from my daughter-in-law, her smile tight, almost rehearsed, her eyes flashing with a brief, chilling satisfaction. I understood in that moment that my place had been decided. Behind this pillar, observing, silenced, and oh baby, I could feel the first tremors of heartbreak. It was a slow boil, a storm forming just beneath the golden light. I gripped the pillar tighter, my nails digging into the wood, trying to anchor myself, to stay grounded, because I had a feeling, a very real, very sharp feeling, that this storm was only beginning. By the time the ceremony ended and guests moved toward the dining area, I was exhausted in a way I had never known. My body carried the weight of exclusion. My heart carried the weight of betrayal, and as I followed the sound of laughter and clinking glasses, baby, I knew deep down, this wasn't just a small oversight. Something larger, more deliberate was unfolding. The cracks were appearing, subtle at first, almost imperceptible. But now they were widening, stretching through my family, through my sense of belonging, through everything I had trusted. And as I pressed my cheek to the pillar one last time before moving, I whispered a quiet prayer. Help me, God. Let me see this clearly. Let me endure what is coming with grace. Because, baby, I had a feeling. The next moments, the moments I couldn't yet see, were going to break my heart in ways I wasn't prepared for. Baby, if I thought the cracks in that day were small, I was wrong. The real blow, the one that would shake me to my core, arrived quietly, almost invisible, and then hit me like a storm I never saw coming. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the dining area. The room was alive with laughter, soft classical music, and the hum of polite conversation. I followed behind, holding my clutch tightly, still pressing myself to the edges, staying in my assigned place, behind the pillar, invisible, a shadow among shadows. And then it happened. The photographer approached, gently trying to guide me into a family photo. Mrs. Grace, could you come forward, please? Just here by David? He asked with a polite smile. Before I could respond, my daughter-in-law stepped forward. Her hand rested lightly but deliberately on my arm. No, thank you, she said, her voice soft but firm. She'll ruin it if she moves. Mom, please stay there, baby. The words cut me like a blade. Ruin it? Me? After everything I had done for this family? My heart froze, my chest tightened, and for a moment, the room seemed to tilt. I could see the guests, smiling and oblivious, their eyes not catching the tension. I could see my son, standing there, smiling at the photographer, unaware. And I realized with a sickening clarity, they had decided my place. And in that place, it was nothing. I pressed my hands against the pillar for support, my knuckles white. The metallic clink of a fallen fork somewhere on the table snapped through the air, echoing like a tiny scream in the quiet spaces around me. Time itself seemed to pause. My breath caught, shallow and quick. I remember staring at my daughter-in-law's face, the rehearsed smile that didn't reach her eyes, and feeling a wave of disbelief crash over me. Baby, I had raised this boy. I had spent years nurturing him, sacrificing, praying, loving, and here, in the golden light of what was supposed to be his happiest day, I was treated as though I were a problem, a shadow, a nuisance to be tucked behind a pillar. I felt my heart cracking in slow, precise pieces. The betrayal wasn't loud, it was quiet, deliberate. It spread through my chest like icy water, numbing me from the inside out. I had been invisible in my own family's celebration, unseen in the most important moment of my son's life. Then the bride laughed with her friends, and I could feel the deliberate distance, the unspoken line drawn between us. Every gesture, every glance reinforced the truth I had been too naive to see until now. Baby, my mind reeled. Have they always felt this way? Was all the warmth, all the smiles just an illusion? I pressed my forehead against the pillar. The polished wood was cold against my cheek, grounding me, but it couldn't stop the ache in my chest. My hands were trembling. Not from the chill, but from the intensity of being excluded, humiliated, and dismissed in the same moment. And then came the whisper that broke me entirely. I caught my daughter-in-law leaning close to my son, speaking low, just loud enough for me to hear. Don't worry. She won't interfere. I've taken care of it, baby. I felt a small, hollow scream rise in my throat. Taken care of? Like I was a child? Like I was a mistake? My vision blurred with unshed tears. I gripped the pillar tighter, trying to steady myself, trying to hold on to the dignity that seemed to be slipping through my fingers. For a heartbeat, I imagined walking away, leaving the room, leaving the wedding, leaving the family that had betrayed me so carefully. But even in my heartbreak, I knew I couldn't. Not yet. I had to endure, had to witness, had to survive this with grace. I remember the frozen snapshot of that moment. The glint of the crystal chandeliers, the bride's veil catching the light, my son's oblivious smile, the whisper in my ear, the subtle motion of hands rearranging me behind the pillar. And in that snapshot, baby, I felt both invisible and entirely seen in the wrong way. Seen as a problem, as a shadow, as someone to be contained. And then it hit me, truly, fully. I realized that this wasn't about my son, not really. It was about the people around him, the family, the alliances, the quiet, deliberate decisions made to erase me from the story of his day. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. My heart ached. My chest felt like it had been squeezed too tightly. I held onto the pillar as if it were my lifeline. Baby, I whispered under my breath. Lord, give me strength. Let me endure this without shattering completely. Minutes stretched into hours. The celebration went on, voices rising and falling, laughter and music weaving through the golden air. And I was stuck in a quiet corner, watching the life I had nurtured celebrate, and realizing that my presence had been reduced to an ornament, a shadow, a forgotten part of the day. And yet, amid the betrayal, something deep inside me shifted. A quiet, stubborn spark of dignity began to burn. Baby, I realized that while they could try to erase me from their story, they could not erase me from myself. My worth, my love, my sacrifices, these things were mine, untouchable, eternal. But oh, the heartbreak was real. Every laugh I watched from behind that pillar, every toast I didn't get to be part of, every smile I was not invited into, it pierced me. And yet, in that piercing pain, I felt the first stirrings of clarity, that the story of my life, my love, my family, was more than what they tried to contain it to. And just as the first wave of despair threatened to swallow me, I felt something I didn't expect. A warmth, a hand, soft and steady, slipping into mine. A stranger, someone who didn't flinch, didn't judge, didn't pity me, but simply held my hand. Baby, that hand, it anchored me. It reminded me that even in the shadow of betrayal, I could still be seen, still be valued, still be held. In that moment, time slowed. I felt a spark of hope flicker through the ache. And I realized, baby, that this storm, this deliberate, painful exclusion, was only part of the story. There was more to come, yes, but so was the possibility of grace, of dignity, of redemption. Baby, I pressed my hand to that stranger's, tears finally spilling over, and whispered softly, "Thank you. Not for saving me from the betrayal, but for reminding me that I could endure it, that I could survive it with my heart intact." And in that small, quiet, cinematic moment, I knew that the next steps, the next confrontations, would not be about humiliation, but about reclaiming what had always belonged to me, my dignity, my presence, my right to be seen, baby. After the storm hits, there's a quiet that follows, not the soft, peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that presses in on you, heavy and suffocating, where every sound is too loud and every heartbeat echoes through the empty spaces inside your chest. That's where I found myself, behind the pillar, clutching the warm, steady hand of a stranger, while the world I had known, the family I had nurtured, celebrated as though I were already gone. I sank to the floor behind that pillar, letting the stranger's hand remain in mine. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me. I thought of David, my boy, my son, who had grown from the tiny bundle I cradled into a man I loved with all my heart. And I wondered, baby, how could they do this to me? How could the people who were supposed to love me, protect me, honor me, quietly conspire to erase me from this day? I whispered prayers under my breath, my lips barely moving. Lord, guide me through this. Let me endure this without losing myself. I remembered all the nights I had prayed over David, all the moments I had poured my love into him, and I felt both gratitude and sorrow entwined. Gratitude for the boy who had become a man, and sorrow for the family that had made me invisible in his happiest moment. The stranger beside me didn't speak much, just held my hand and offered a calm presence. Baby, sometimes, the quietest gestures carry the deepest meaning. That hand reminded me I was still human, still worthy of care, still capable of being seen, even when the people I loved most had turned their backs. I thought of my own reflections over the years, the nights I had spent alone, wondering if I had done enough, loved enough, given enough, and now, sitting behind a pillar in the golden light of my son's wedding, I realized the truth. Life doesn't always reward you for love. Sometimes it tests it. Sometimes it places you in the shadows to see how brightly you can shine even there. Tears rolled down my cheeks, unchecked now. I let them fall, baby, because crying doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. I thought of every moment that had led to this day. The scraped knees I had kissed, the late-night stories, the whispered advice, the prayers. And for a brief, bittersweet second, I grieved not just for the moment lost, but for the realization that love, no matter how pure, doesn't always protect you from pain. The laughter from the hall felt distant, almost surreal, like it belonged to another life. I could see glimpses of my son smiling, shaking hands, toasting to his new life. But each image pierced me with the reality that I wasn't meant to be part of the celebration in the way I had imagined. Baby, the hurt was a quiet ache that settled in my bones, a slow, steady reminder that even in the warmth of golden light, shadows exist. I thought of the conversations that would come later, of the glances I would have to face, of the polite questions and forced smiles. I imagined the whispers behind my back, the judgments, the assumptions about my character and intentions. And for a long moment, I felt utterly alone. But even in that solitude, I found a strange clarity. I began to understand that the depth of pain is often the birthplace of truth. Pain forces you to look inside yourself, to recognize the strength you've always had but never needed to summon before. Baby, I realized that while my heart ached, while my dignity had been challenged, I still had the power to rise, to reclaim my space, to hold on to the love and grace that no one could take away. I stayed behind that pillar for a while longer, letting the golden light of the chandeliers wash over me, letting the warmth of the stranger's hand anchor me. I thought about how I would tell this story someday, not just as a tale of betrayal, but as a testament to endurance, to dignity, to the unbreakable thread of love that binds us even when others fail to recognize it. In the quiet aftermath of that betrayal, I whispered to myself, "You are more than what they see. Your worth is not determined by their approval. You are loved, you are strong, and you will survive this." Baby. The pain lingered. Yes, it pressed against me like the weight of the world. But I began to breathe again, slowly, deliberately, finding rhythm in the heartbeat of my own spirit. I realized that grief and sorrow are not enemies. They are teachers, guiding you toward the strength you didn't know you had. Hours passed, and the celebration continued around me, unaware of the quiet drama behind the pillar. I could hear the soft strains of music, the clinking of glasses, the polite laughter of guests. And I knew in my heart that this night would leave a mark, not just of betrayal, but of awakening. Baby, sometimes the deepest wounds give birth to the clearest vision. By the time the dancing began, I was still behind the pillar, but I no longer felt entirely crushed. I had faced the betrayal, felt the sting of exclusion, and allowed myself to grieve. And in that grieving, baby, I discovered the first sparks of resilience, the quiet hum of strength that would carry me through the moments to come. I held onto that stranger's hand a little tighter and let the warmth seep into my spirit. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, kindness exists, that even when you are unseen by those you love most, you can still be held, still be valued, still find grace. Baby, that night, behind the pillar, I learned a truth I would never forget. Pain does not define you. Betrayal does not erase you. And the measure of your worth is never in the hands of those who fail to see you. It is in how you hold yourself, how you endure, how you rise. And in the quiet golden glow of that wedding hall, as the music swelled and the laughter floated through the air, I felt it. The deep ache of heartbreak, yes, but also the first whisper of hope. A promise that this pain, this betrayal, this moment behind the pillar, it was not the end. It was a beginning. Baby, after the storm of heartbreak, there comes a moment when the world shifts, subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. That moment found me still behind the pillar, hands trembling slightly, tears still fresh on my cheeks, heart heavy yet alert. And it was then that I realized something crucial. The betrayal, the exclusion, the humiliation. None of it defined me. My worth, my love, my dignity, they were mine, untouchable, unshakable, no matter how others tried to diminish me. I looked down at my hands, still clutching the warmth of the stranger's hand, and for the first time that day, I allowed myself to see clearly. Baby, I realized that their actions, their deliberate sidelining were not about me. They were about their insecurities, their fears, and their need for control. It had nothing to do with my love, my sacrifices, my devotion to my son, and that understanding, it was liberating. The stranger beside me didn't speak, just held my hand gently, letting me feel the calm I so desperately needed. And in that quiet presence, I began to see things differently. I saw my son, not as someone oblivious, but as someone caught in the current of others' expectations, trying to navigate a world that often prioritized appearances over love. I saw my daughter-in-law, not as malicious, but as someone deeply invested in control and image, someone whose insecurities had cast me aside. And I saw myself, not broken, not defeated, but stronger than I had ever acknowledged. Baby, clarity is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It slips in quietly, like dawn breaking through a stormy night. I realized that I had been holding on to their perception of me for far too long. I had tied my self-worth to their approval, my happiness to their acknowledgement, and in that moment, I chose to release it. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and breathed deeply. The golden light of the chandeliers caught my tears, turning them into tiny prisms of strength. Baby, it was a subtle transformation, but a powerful one. I no longer needed their validation. I had my own. I had my son's love, unconditional and pure, and I had the strength that comes from enduring pain with grace. As I stepped slightly away from the pillar, I felt a shift within me, a quiet confidence that whispered, "You are seen." You are worthy. You are enough. The world around me hadn't changed. The room was still filled with laughter, music, and celebration, but something inside me had changed forever. I thought back to all the moments I had doubted myself, the nights I had prayed over my son, wondering if I had done enough, the mornings I had worried about how he would turn out, the sacrifices I had made silently, unseen, believing love alone would be enough. Baby, I realize now that love alone is powerful, but clarity, self-awareness, and dignity are what protect it. And then, almost unexpectedly, a quiet smile touched my lips. I saw my son glancing toward me, confusion and concern flickering in his eyes. I realized that he had begun to notice, truly notice, the subtle tension, the silent exclusion, the way I had been pushed aside. And in that glance, baby, I felt the first stirrings of justice, not loud, dramatic justice, but the quiet, inevitable kind that arrives when truth is recognized. I took another deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs, steadying myself. I whispered softly to the stranger beside me, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." Baby, it wasn't just about their kindness. It was about the mirror they held up, reflecting the strength I had almost forgotten I possessed. And then, in that quiet moment, clarity fully arrived. I understood that my presence, my love, my history with my son, these things could never be erased. No pillar, no whispers, no orchestrated exclusion could diminish the bond we shared. Baby, the realization hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. I had survived this day not just to witness the wedding, but to reclaim myself within it. The music swelled around me, the laughter continued, and yet I felt an inner calm, a quiet power. Baby, I realized that while the world may try to place you behind pillars, to silence you, to make you invisible, you always have a choice. You can remain in the shadows, or you can step into your own light, carrying the dignity and grace that no one can take from you. I straightened fully, letting go of the pillar, and allowed myself to be present, not for them, oh no, baby, but for me, for the love I had poured into this life, for the mother I had been, for the woman I had always been beneath their judgments. And in that moment, baby, I felt something powerful, the turning point, the moment when pain begins to transform into strength, when heartbreak becomes clarity, when betrayal is met not with collapse, but with quiet reclamation. And as I looked across the room at my son, radiant and smiling, I understood the final truth of the day. It wasn't about their choices, their manipulations, or their control. It was about mine, about how I would respond, how I would carry myself, how I would honor the love I had given and the woman I had always been. Baby, and I chose to rise. The stranger's hand slipped from mine, a soft squeeze of encouragement, and I felt fully rooted in myself for the first time that day. Baby, the storm of betrayal had not destroyed me. It had revealed me. It had shown me the depth of my strength, the resilience of my heart, the clarity of my spirit, and in that quiet, cinematic moment, bathed in golden light, surrounded by the hum of celebration, I knew the day's real story had begun. Not the story they wanted to tell, but the one I would carry forward. A story of grace, of dignity, of recognition, and above all, of unwavering self-worth. Baby, I whispered to myself, soft as a prayer, this is not the end. It is the beginning, and I will walk through the rest of this day, and every day after, with my head held high, my heart intact, and my spirit unbroken. Baby, sometimes life doesn't hand you justice quietly. Sometimes you have to step forward and claim it yourself. And that's exactly what I realized as I straightened my back and walked into the room, golden light catching my tears and turning them into armor. The music was soft now, a slow waltz playing in the background as guests mingled, glasses in hand, laughter ringing through the air. I felt the eyes of the room turn to me. Not all at once, but in fragments, small glances that gradually grew into the awareness of my presence. And baby, I knew the time had come. I approached my son first, my steps steady, deliberate. "David," I said softly, just loud enough for him to hear. His eyes widened, a flicker of concern passing through his gaze. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, voice gentle, uncertain. I took a deep breath, placing a hand on his arm. Baby, I'm more than okay, but I need you to understand something. My voice was calm, measured, but beneath it lay a river of emotion, hurt, love, and clarity all flowing together. We moved slightly aside, and I spoke, not in anger, not in accusation, but in truth. Today, I was pushed behind a pillar, hidden from the celebration, treated as though my presence didn't matter. Words were whispered, gestures made, to erase me from your day. Baby, I need you to see this clearly. He swallowed hard, the warmth and confusion in his eyes making my chest ache and swell at the same time. Mom, I didn't know. I didn't see it, he whispered. I cupped his face gently, my thumb brushing away a tear he didn't know he had shed. That's exactly the point, baby. Sometimes love isn't enough if people around you forget who deserves to be seen. And today I was forgotten. But I am still here. I am still present. And I am still worthy of being part of your life, fully and openly. Then I turned toward my daughter-in-law. Her eyes widened as she realized I wasn't cowering, wasn't shuffling behind pillars, wasn't letting the whispered manipulations define me. I could see the shift in her expression, a flicker of surprise, a hint of guilt, but I didn't pause for it. Baby, justice isn't about their recognition. It's about reclaiming your own dignity. I spoke, steady and clear. You tried to erase me, to control my place in this room, to make me invisible. But no one has the right to diminish the love I have given, or the bond I share with my son. Not today, not ever. A hush fell over the room. Guests shifted, sensing the tension, feeling the weight of truth settling like golden light on polished floors. I could see them processing it, some glancing at the pillar, others at the expressions on their own faces. And I knew, baby, that truth has a way of revealing itself quietly but unmistakably. My son reached for my hand, holding it firmly, as though anchoring himself in the reality that his mother was more than the orchestrated exclusions, more than the whispers, more than the carefully constructed shadow of the room. Mom, I see you now, he said, voice firm and steady, and I am so sorry. I nodded, tears glinting in my eyes, but there was no collapse. There was no desperate plea for acknowledgement. Baby, I didn't need it. I had already reclaimed my dignity. The apology was simply a witness to the strength I had found. Then quietly I added, my gaze steady on my daughter-in-law. Baby, love doesn't need control to survive. It grows in the light, in honesty, in respect. Today, you had a chance to show love. Instead, you tried to hide it. Remember that for the future. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Baby, I didn't wait for her response. I knew it wasn't mine to own. Justice had already been done, not as punishment, but as truth. The room had seen it, felt it, and I had felt it within myself. That was enough. I turned back to my son, smiling softly, and whispered, let's go join the celebration, baby. Together, fully and openly. No more shadows, no more pillars. Just us. The stranger who had first held my hand earlier in the day caught my eye from across the room, a small, knowing smile. Baby, that hand, that presence, had reminded me of something I almost forgot. Sometimes, the people who lift you up are not the ones you expect. Sometimes, the grace that restores you comes from the most unexpected places. As I walked toward the center of the room, toward the music, toward my son and his bride, I felt a quiet triumph. Not the loud, vindictive kind, but the calm, serene kind that comes from knowing your worth, standing in your truth, and refusing to be diminished. Baby, the power of that moment was cinematic, golden, real. Guests began to notice, subtly at first, the shift. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't a shadow. I was present. I was glowing. Not because of the chandeliers or the music, but because I had reclaimed myself. And that, baby, is the truest justice there is. Standing tall when the world tries to make you small. The rest of the evening unfolded differently. My son held my hand, led me into the center of the celebration, and for the first time that day, I danced, I laughed, I felt fully part of the joy I had nurtured all my life. Baby, The same people who had tried to erase me now had no choice but to witness my presence, my dignity, my love, shining brighter than any orchestrated control. And I realized something profound in that cinematic, golden light moment. Justice isn't always about punishment or revenge. Sometimes it's about claiming your space, holding on to your love, and letting the world see the unshakable truth of who you are. Baby, that truth is more powerful than any whisper, any manipulation, any attempt to hide you behind a pillar. By the time the night drew on, I was surrounded not by shadows but by light, my son at my side, friends and family witnessing my grace, and even that stranger, who had reminded me of my own worth, smiling quietly. Baby, justice had arrived quietly, beautifully, and fully. And in the depths of that moment, I whispered to myself, soft as a prayer, "You endured, you rose, you claimed your dignity. And no one can ever take that from you." Baby, after storms pass, the world doesn't always change, but something inside you does. That night, as the last of the guests laughed and the music softened to a gentle hum, I felt a peace I hadn't known in hours, maybe in years. The betrayal, the humiliation, the heartbreak, it was still there. Yes, but it no longer had the power to define me. I had survived it. I had risen above it. And I had discovered a strength that would carry me for the rest of my life. I sat with my son afterward, our hands entwined, and we shared quiet moments of reflection. No words could undo the pain, but baby, sometimes just being seen, truly seen, is enough to begin the healing. "Mom," David whispered, voice heavy with emotion. "I am so sorry. I see everything now. I promise I will never let this happen again." And I nodded, smiling softly, feeling the warmth of our bond restored, deeper now because it had been tested and endured. Time, baby, has a way of softening sharp edges. In the days that followed, I thought back to that wedding. The laughter, the music, the golden glow, the whispers behind pillars, and the hand of a stranger that reminded me of my worth. I replayed the moments of exclusion, the ache in my chest, the glances that once cut me like knives, and I realized I had turned each of those moments into lessons. I learned, baby, that pain teaches patience, betrayal teaches discernment, and heartbreak teaches resilience. I understood that being pushed aside doesn't make you small. It makes your courage shine brighter when you reclaim your space. And I knew that the grace I had found in that stranger's gentle gesture, the hand that held mine when I felt invisible, was a reminder of the kindness and love that still exist in this world, even when the people closest to you fail. In the quiet of the evening, I walked through the garden, the cool air brushing my face, roses swaying in the soft wind, the golden light of lanterns reflected off the petals, and baby, it felt like a kind of redemption. A soft, quiet acknowledgement that life continues, that love endures, and that the soul can heal even when the heart has been bruised. I thought of my son, now beginning his life with his bride, and I wished him joy and wisdom. And I thought of myself, baby, and realized that this journey wasn't just about surviving a wedding. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my grace, my sense of self. I had learned that love does not always arrive wrapped in the ways we expect. Sometimes it comes from a stranger's hand, a quiet truth, a moment of clarity in the midst of pain. I smiled as I walked back into the hall, now emptying but still echoing with the memories of laughter and music. I felt lighter, unburdened. Baby, I realized that forgiveness isn't just for others. It's for you. Forgiveness allows your soul to breathe, allows your heart to heal, allows you to step into the next chapter with confidence, not bitterness. And in that moment, I forgave. Not because they deserved it, but because I needed peace. The days and weeks after the wedding were gentle. I spent time with my son, reflecting, sharing, laughing. I kept the memory of that stranger's hand close to my heart, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light finds a way to reach you. And baby, I let myself embrace the truth that while people may try to hide you behind pillars, you always have the choice to step into your own light, to claim your space, to live fully and openly. I remember sitting one evening, holding a cup of coffee, looking at the roses outside my window, and thinking, life is a series of challenges, betrayals, and joys. Each one shapes us, teaches us, and molds us into the people we are meant to become. Baby, I understood that I had endured, not just for myself, but for the generations who would follow, for the love that remains steadfast, and for the grace that guides us through the shadows. And in that golden, cinematic light, I whispered softly to myself, I am whole. I am seen. I am enough. Baby, let me tell you something. Sometimes, the most painful moments lead to the most profound growth. Sometimes the people who try to diminish you reveal your true strength, and sometimes the hand that saves you comes from the most unexpected place. That night, I walked to my son's side, and together, we watched the stars emerge in the sky, each one a tiny glimmer of hope and promise. I felt peace, baby, deep in my bones. The betrayal had not destroyed me. The storm had passed, and in its place I found clarity, grace, and renewal. And as I closed my eyes, breathing in the cool night air and the scent of roses, I whispered a prayer of gratitude. Gratitude for love, for resilience, for the quiet lessons of life, and for the unshakable truth that no one can take away the dignity and strength you carry within. Baby, that's the story, not of a wedding, not of betrayal, but of a woman who remembered her worth, claimed her space, and found healing and peace, even when the world tried to hide her behind a pillar. Baby, let me tell you something. Life doesn't always give you the place you think you deserve. Sometimes it hides you behind pillars, whispers in shadows, and tests the love you've given. But here's the truth, baby. Your worth isn't decided by where others put you. It's decided by how you hold yourself when they try to make you small. Sometimes love and grace arrive in the hands of strangers, in quiet moments, in the stillness after the storm, and sometimes heartbreak teaches you more than joy ever could. But real grace, baby, real grace, is knowing that even when the world forgets you, even when people betray you, you can stand tall, step into the light, and reclaim your dignity. So remember, baby, never let anyone's actions define you. Carry your love, your strength, your heart, and let it shine, even if you have to shine alone for a little while. Because the woman who survives, who rises, who holds her head high, she carries a light no one can ever dim.